Iced out, Cuban lane, Rolex, VBS, pinky ring. Walk the same, talk the same, stay the same. Fuck the fame, never change. Cause I cannot wait until they set me free. So I finally can spend the rest of my days with you, girl.
Yeah, what's up? What's up? Peace, stuck and drink. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. It's your boy Peace, Stuck and Drink back again with another video. Today we're gonna be reading on the history of pumpkin pie, and I still got a special video coming out. I just got edited. This is called "From Jack-o'-lantern to Pumpkin Pie: The Surprising History of a Favorite Fall Icon" by Danielle Grant, published October 27, 2015, updated October 12, 2019. Shout out to Danielle Grant. Many of us take for granted the American tradition of displaying covered pumpkins on the stoop of Halloween, but why pumpkins, and how did they become so much a part of American life, from pies to giant show pumpkins, from pumpkin spice lattes to pumpkin festival? Obviously interviewed Candy Art, Cindy Art, author of Pumpkin the Curious History of an American Icon, and discovered the surprising and varied roles that pumpkins have played in American culture. Below is condensed and lightly edited version of our phone conversation. Danielle Grant, how did you become interested in the cultural histories of pumpkins in the arts? It's a good origin story because I was helping a friend who has a fall stand outside of Washington, D.C., and after being out there for several weekends in a row, I started thinking, what's going on? Thousands of families are piling into their cars and driving 30 miles out of the country to buy this vegetable that they aren't even going to eat. And then, of course, everything else began. Wait, pumpkin's a vegetable? Dang. Obviously, I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm just dumb. In the back, vegetable that they aren't even going to eat. And then, of course, everything else began to look funny, like the fact that you take a vegetable and put it on your front stoop, and that unlikely people around the world who eat pumpkin and squash unceremonious. You find it in the American markets in fall, sweetened as a dessert and wrap it up in a national tradition and association with the harvest. Small towns put on pumpkin festivals even though few people have any sort of economic or historic ties to the vegetable. So I began looking into the deeper questions of how Americans use nature and history to create these national and personal traditions, and impact that they have on our rural economics. Almost every food has a cultural history in America. Life like apples in American life, like apples, strawberries, and cherries. But what makes the pumpkin unique is not only its huge size. You could have a 28 1-ounce apple or a huge ear of corn, which aren't that big compared to a 2,000-pound pumpkin, but also the fact that it has no particular use. So is so so this is a good model to talk about. These kinds of bigger cultural trends, the pumpkin and the squash, are but initially indistinguishable, and American didn't start distinguishing between them until the 19th century. They did No, my bad was my eyes. My bad, guys. My eyes. This whole, I don't know what's wrong with my eyes. Allergies, my bad. Um, was for example, the largest, hold on, century. They did so far. They did so for reasons not for any kind of for, but but how about they? Oh, my bad. But an analytical or physical differences. Maybe, for example, the largest candy pumpkin producer in the country calls their product pumpkin instead of squash because the pumpkin means more. Pumpkin means more to the average American consumer. But if you saw the thing, it looks just like squash because it is squash. But of course, they call the pumpkin. But of course, they call it pumpkin because who wants to buy who wants to buy a can of squash? So this is not just a story of myth making, myth making, but also one showing the repercussions of these myths for rural economics. DG. If squash and pumpkin are genetically equivalent, when did breeding pumpkins become a cultural priority and for what reason? CO. Through the colonial period, many squash varieties were interchangeable in the early 19th century when people were moving off farms and into cities. The smaller and sweeter varieties that we now call squash were available in the marketplace and people ate them on a daily basis like we do now. Zucchini and winter squash, for example, has some commodity status and were part of their daily lives, but the pumpkin, the orange round squash, was the crop that was left behind on the farm and it didn't go into the marketplace. Small scale farmers it kept it in production because it was a substitute for livestock fodder, but it wasn't in any way part of the modern agricultural system. It started to represent an old-fashioned way to make a living off the land. So, in the early 19th century, when industrial agriculture took off, there was no room for the pumpkin in the marketplace. But this was exactly the time it started to appear in Winsor Homer's painting and Harper's Magazine and romantic poems. Damn, that's beautiful. Nah. The depiction of a colonial landscape featuring pumpkins at center. DG. The culture changed in the attitude towards the pumpkin coming across the country, or did some areas regard it more favorably than others? The pumpkin was also wrapped up in politics. So some of the most popular white stories about pumpkins in poems and short stories were also strong abolitionists who saw the pumpkin as a symbol of a virtuous, small-scale farming way of life. It had a very different meaning in the American South. A lot of Southerners, and especially African American Southerners, ate sweet potato pie, but not pumpkin pie, and not because pumpkin wasn't available. Pumpkin was available, but in the South, that small scale way of life was associated with poor tenant farmers and poor rural blacks. So it didn't have nearly the romance that it did in the North. There was also a very derogatory association between pumpkins and poor blacks. So it wasn't revered in the same kind of way during Reconstruction. After the Civil War, whites from the North and South united against African Americans, so cultural taste for the pumpkin pie remained largely a white northern attitude, while sweet potato pie remained associated with black southern cooking. So there was a cultural history behind what's difference in taste to DG. When did industrial pumpkin production really take off? Where was it? Okay. See, Moulton, Illinois is a location of a Libby's processing plant. Libby's control about 90% of the market in culinary pumpkins, and they've been around almost 100 years. In 1970, they tried to have one big corporate-sized pumpkin farm in California, and the plan was to ship the crop back to Moulton for processing. So they tried that model, but it didn't work because the market for pumpkins is lucrative but limited. It could be eaten throughout the year, but it's not. 90% of markets is from September through January. Huge corporate agricultural business didn't want to invest in it, so it became a niche market for small farmers. Libby's returned to Moulton to distribute the seeds for what they call Libby Select Dickinson Pumpkin. What? Now I don't even know how much sense that makes. And this seed to between 50 and 70 small family farms within the Serenity 5-mile radius of the plant, and these farms are about 300 acres each. So these are small-scale farmers. These farms then plant these seeds on behalf of Libby's. I know Libby's 100% pure pumpkin. They have started having pumpkin festivals as well. And in these festivals, you don't celebrate modern agriculture. You don't go out there to learn about genetically modified crops and things related to industrial agriculture. You go out there to learn about these deep values. That's what being marketed. So even the most industrial scale form of pumpkin production helps to support small families, farms. The industrial process isn't even high tech. They take the whole thing, they make a stew out of it, they strain it, and it's peel pumpkin without some of the water content. The trucks roll in, they put it in cans. It practice that dates as far back as 1900. So it's not all that high tech, the process, and then it's distributed by trucks. Anybody who cook with fresh pumpkin will know it's not the same as fresh pumpkin, but it has become the tradition for most Americans to bake pies with the canned pumpkin. DG pumpkins also tend to be prized for the aesthetic appeal. If you are a pumpkin farmer, the key is also to have variety, because the families that buy them each get one of a different size and shape. But in But in the story of how it became an icon, it was really consumers creating the market and the farmers following to meet demand. Farmers would be driving down the highway in a truck full of pumpkins for their hogs, and they'd be stopped by tourists on their Sunday drives through the country asking if they could buy pumpkins. Farmers never had to. The idea that this was going to be a commodity. So then the seed company started changing the seed to fit the idea that this was going to be an objective of display, monument of something to eat. Today, 65 to 17% of pumpkin production is for ornamental pumpkins, and they are produced around the country. Most places across the country are conducive for small families. Produce these, you can throw in a few seeds and get a pretty good yield. It's an interactive but limited market. So, oh shit, I'm so tired. Let's continue. What was that? Nationwide, but almost everyone ships. What's that? What's inclusive, limited market. So there were almost nobody that ships nationwide, but almost everyone ships locally. If you are a trucker in Nebraska, you basically stick in Nebraska for pumpkins because it just don't pay. Because it just doesn't pay, especially for ornamentals. If they get naked or the stem falls off, they are worth it. So that makes a local crop too. That's the picture. Two farms bring people out to pick pumpkins in the fall, and this diversify their products to appeal to different tastes. They might sell jams and golds and many varieties of pumpkins to get a variety of consumer products for people to buy. They make more money selling pumpkins than almost anything else. There are stories of farmers putting up their pig sty or cabbage of pea cobs to put in a pumpkin patch and parking lot because they make more money selling pumpkins 6 months of the year than they do selling hogs or other crops. That's crazy. Or pork chops and everything. I've heard about small towns having pumpkin festivals. What's that say? All pumpkin celebrations all across the country. These annual festivals have, in many cases, replaced the 4th of July celebration, but most places don't have any kind of economic ties or large-scale pumpkins production. Spring Hope, North Carolina, for example, has the annual Spring Hope Pumpkin Festival that pulls the town into the old stories about American culture, programs, and the virtuous game. The national stories become their local stories. They may not feel that Spring Hope is enough of a draw. I think the pumpkin gives people a sense of knowing what it means. They may not be able to tell you what it means, but they know it resonates. They like it and it's positive information. For them, materially, it's really helping revitalize small towns. Two, they use the money for beautification. They've built facilities in the parks, and they've put lights up in the towns. So it made a huge difference too. It made a huge difference too for these small rural communities to have these pumpkin fests. See, in what ways has pumpkin also become associated with con? Well, there's no particular reason to put pumpkins in pumpkins in a cup of coffee or make pie with it. So these uses suggest that the meanings are more important than the meat. Time magazine's ran covers for it. For 2001 Thanksgiving issues, only a couple months after 9/11, portraying playing pumpkins pie with an American flag stuck in it against a stark white background. So this food that was once desperation in the colonial period became food that Americans return to for saying this is who we are, and tying back to allegation that there's if these positive affirmations and make a strong statement about who we are during one of the most difficult times for the country. How did jack-o'-lanterns become a distinctly American icon? There's a long tradition of associating the pumpkin with wild nature that predates Halloween. The pumpkin became part of Halloween because some of these older associations, the jack-o'-lantern is tradition from old Celtic tradition. It is also derived from the folklore icon War of the Wisp. A creepy that in marshes or woods that could possess travelers passing by. Similarly, the jack-o'-lantern is an icon in African American folklore about lots and creepy things in the dark. Even Sleepy Hollow predated jack-o'-lanterns in the 1830s, but it had these associations with being out in the creepy, not because of the way it grows and appears more like an animal than a plant. It didn't just become the Halloween pumpkin only because it was housing in the autumn and had a head-like shape, because really the deep meaning are much older. There's much longer history of it being associated with wild nature, and only later would it become the Halloween symbol. How did some popular phrases and rhymes like Peter, Peter, Pumpkin Eater come about? Those kinds of rhymes are hard to date, but what's surprising is that the gender dynamic around pumpkin never changed from Roman times to present, with man and pumpkin has been associated with a male's head, and he's a stupid and pompous, empty-headed politician. All the way into present, you see cartoons in the Washington Post portraying AI girl as a pumpkin head, with woman empty-headed politician on the way into the present. You see cartoons in the Washington Post portraying Al Gore as a pumpkin head with woman is associated with her body, primitive sex drive, and reproduction in Philip Roth's 1969 novel It's not enough, but he wrote about a woman he calls Pumpkin because she represents an American object of sexual desire. In the 19th century, children started being called pumpkins because they went from being regarded as little adults that should be restrained to children of nature that should express their natural feelings. So that's when you start seeing paintings of home with pumpkins next to kids, because they both represent this idea of natural goodness. Babies had an amazing ad of a giant pumpkin with two little rosy cheeks. Babies ask if to say all pumpkins is sweet because they both represent this idea of natural innocence. I'm surprised that when you start painting of home next to the kids, because they both represent the idea of natural goodness. Babies and pumpkin with two little rosy cheeks. Babies as if say all pumpkins is sweet because they both represent this idea of nature, innocence, and abundance. Cover photo by Fickle Diesel Bill. It's been about peace. I can jump back again right now. Reveal I'm gone. Peace.